Welcome back to our tutorial on Activity 2.3, Playing with Lists. Today we're going to address some minor behaviors in our Charades game app. This activity is known as our housekeeping challenge. We've noticed in our last tutorial that there is the potential for a word or phrase to be repeated when the click here for word phrase button is clicked. Now right now our app is basically programmed to simply pick a random item from our word phrase list. This can cause that word or phrase to be repeated. If that does occur, your player has basically one of two options. The player can pretend as though they guessed it correctly and gain a point, or they can simply skip to the next word or phrase, which means they lose a point. Neither option is really fair to any of the players in the game. So we're going to take a closer look at how we can prevent this from happening. Option 1 is that we use this pick random item list. And again, if you have a larger list, this may not be so much of a problem for you because less likely of a chance that that item is going to be repeated. But if you have a shorter list like we do in our game right now, there is a greater potential that that word or phrase can actually be repeated. So instead of using this pick random item for list, we're going to go ahead and use this select list item command. What this is basically going to do is select a specific item in a list based on its index or position. So we're going to go ahead and look at MIT App Inventor and learn how to use a conditional statement, not only to select an item from a list based on its index, but also to get that list to sequentially run through the top to the bottom in order to prevent anything from actually repeating. So let's go ahead and take a look at our MIT App Inventor and how we can fix our minor behaviors. Now that we're in MIT App Inventor, let's go ahead and take a closer look at our program or our blocks that we've created for our charades game. The first thing we want to look at is this global variable word phrase list. You'll notice that we've created a list, and in our list we have 6 different items, anywhere from going bowling all the way down to playing soccer. Right now our program is picked to select a random item, so it can pick any one of those 6 options. Once it selects those options and displays it, we need to then go ahead and click on that button again to get a new word or phrase. This is where we have the potential for it to select the same item in that list. We're going to go ahead and replace that today so that it's going to select an item based on its index. And then as we progress, our options are going to basically go sequentially through that list until we get to the bottom. Once we get to the bottom, the next word or phrase will be displayed, will be that first item in that list, and it'll keep repeating until the game is done. So in order to modify this, we're going to go ahead and look at this pick next word procedure. So one of the first things we want to go ahead and do is we're going to actually replace this pick a random item list command. So we're going to go ahead and drag that out of the procedure. The next thing we want to go ahead and do is take a look at our list options. And as we go through this, what we're going to look for is a block that says select list item list. So as you go down through these, you can see here it is, select list item list, and we also have the option to select the index. So now that we have that, we need to go ahead and still make sure that we're selecting our item from our global word phrase list. So now I'm going to go ahead and get rid of my pick random list item since we don't need it anymore. And now we need to identify the index. Well, we're going to start off with index 1, which means that's the first option or position in my list. So we're going to grab a math block here, and we're going to go ahead and put the number 1 in. So when we go ahead and click that button or that pick next word procedure runs, we're basically going to start off by identifying index 1 in our list. Now we're going to create a new variable here called current index. So in order to do this, we're going to go to variables. We need to initialize this variable, and we're going to go ahead and rename this, and we're just going to go ahead and call this the current index. This will keep track of our index as it moves through the actual list. We're going to want to go ahead and set that index to be the number 0. So we're going to start off at 0 for right now. Now that we have that, we're going to be able to go ahead and create a condition that's going to allow us to kind of cycle through that list as we move forward. So we're going to grab a control structure and we're going to use an if then else block. So basically, we're going to have a condition with two possible outcomes based off of that condition. So the condition that we're going to use is we're going to look at this current index. And we want to know if that current index is equal to the length of the list, then we want something to happen. So in order for us to do that, we're going to grab a math block and bring that equal sign in, since we're using a comparison. And we're going to grab our new variable, which is going to be our get current index. And that is going to go ahead and equal, in our list drawer, we want to know what the length of the list is. So I'm going to grab that length of list, and the list we're looking at is our global word phrase list. So basically what that's going to do is, right now when my app starts, my current index is set to 0. So if 0 is equal to the length of list, and right now remember my length of list is 6, then my then statement would actually run. What that basically means is we're going to set it back so that we see that first item again. So what we're going to do is reset my global variable of current index. So we can go ahead and set the current index back to 1. So this will only run once we get to the end of the list. So if my current index is ever equal to 6, which means if 6 is equal to the length of the list, which is 6, then we want to set my index or my variable back to 1. That means that when we go and hit that next word phrase button again, it's basically going to display the first item in that list. Now, what is going to happen if it's not equal? This is where we can get it to move on to the next word. If that's the case, we're going to go ahead and set this global current index. And what we're going to set this to is to get the global current index and add 1 to it. So again, we're going to grab a math block, and we're going to go ahead and get our current index. And from there, we're going to go ahead and add 1 to that. So again, if we take a look at the first option, when we initialize our program, our current index is 0. So if 0 is equal to the length of the list, which it is not, that means it's going to run my else statement. So then we're going to set the global index to be current index, which is 0, to add 1. So now my current index is equal to 1. If that's the case, we want to go ahead and set that item label text. So I'm just going to duplicate those blocks and drag the rest out. And we want to go ahead and set that to select the list item. So now we're going to pull these guys out, and we're going to go ahead and select our list item. The list we're using is our global word phrase list, but the index is going to be whatever that current index is. So if we go back to our variables and get that current index, we should be able to go ahead and cycle through our list as we move forward. So let's take a look at our application. So right now, if I click that word phrase list, what you're going to notice is my first option is going bowling. So now before, when we selected a random item, it could have been any one of those 6 items. Every time we reinitialize our app, it's going to start with go bowling. So the next one, if our program works correctly, should be building a campfire, then having a food fight, then making a pizza, jogging, and then playing soccer. Now that we've gotten to the end of the list, what we want to check is if we hit this again, we should reset our list back to index 1, which means we should see going bowling. And there you have how to correct some of your minor behaviors and get your list to run in a sequential order rather than using a random list item.